Here is the 2001 version of the Hampton Bay Grayton. This one is made by SMC. Where's the high stop? There it is. Hopefully that's becoming in focus. I can't see the camera preview. This is, barring some very minor differences, this is pretty much identical to this Boston Harbor branded one, which is still under manufacture. It's really hard to believe that these fans are 25 years apart, because they are pretty much the same thing. Like the Boston Harbor one, I was pretty impressed with this one. I think this is a very pleasant surprise. Now, I generally hold Hampton Bay branded fans at a pretty high regard. I feel like they were generally decent quality, especially in this era. But SMC tend to make some pretty noisy fans. They use some pretty cheap bearings. And something like this, it just kind of screamed like humming, buzzing, noisy piece of junk that doesn't move a lot of air. And quite frankly, that couldn't be further from the truth. I have a spec sheet for this one here in the manual. It lists some specifications. According to this, the top CFM is 3,447, which is not particularly impressive, but that's very respectable for a 42-inch fan. The RPM is claimed to be 215 on high. Now, unlike the CFM, I actually believe the RPM specs are probably pretty accurate. And the motor wattage is 31 on low, 36 on high, and 49... No, that's wrong. 31 on low, 36 on medium, and 49 on high. This is a coil tap speed control unit, not capacitor based. So for that reason as well, I kind of figured it might be kind of noisy. It's not noisy, it is blurry though. It's not noisy in the slightest. In fact, the motor is completely silent on all three speeds. Here's the fastest. And there might be a very, very faint hum that's only visible. Only visible. Yeah, you see that hum? That's only audible. I'm a little bit upset because this is the second time I'm filming this video. The first time I filmed it, everything was fine. I went to import the video into the computer, and in typical stupid piece of junk Mac fashion, there was a problem. The hard drive was full. Now, in the rest of the world, in any normal, reasonable program, if you try to execute an action that doesn't work, you get an error. So what should have happened is the import program should have put an error that said, destination disk is full, cannot import. Oh no, it doesn't do that. Instead, it just tries to do something that's not going to work, and then it crashes and corrupts everything. Stupid. I hate the Mac. I really wish that there was another video editing program that was fluid enough for me to use easily on Windows or Linux or something else, because I hate the Mac. I can't stand it. Okay, so there's that out of the way. I just figured I would include that because somebody in the comments box said there should be more rants in the videos. So there's a small rant about the stupid Mac. But anyways, aside from the very, very faint hum that you can only hear if your ear is within a couple inches of the fan as it starts up for a few seconds, the motor on this thing is completely inaudible, and it's like that on all three speeds, which is surprising. From my experience, SMC is notorious for having very loud hums to the motors, especially on the lower speeds, but not this one. So this is full speed, which claims to be 215 RPM, and I think that seems about right. It's going pretty fast. I should really invest in a tachometer, not that they're particularly expensive, but it would be interesting to be able to compare these specs that it claims in the manual with something we can actually measure in real life. As far as the airflow claims go, it's hard to say because this ceiling severely impedes the operation of the fan. You have, the blades are just a couple inches down from the rafters, which is nowhere near as much clearance as it's supposed to have. So you get this kind of choppy sound. Which is particularly noticeable in the garage with the Enviro fans in the garage. That chopping sound would go away on a normal ceiling install, and it would also probably move a fair bit more air. But even under this condition, it's still quite powerful. Let me get the airflow tester out. This doesn't work very well with ceiling fans. This is mostly designed for portable fans, but in the case in point, it's moving some pretty good air around. And you'll be able to see as well on the side here that it's pulling a lot of air up into the rafter, and this is why it's having a problem, because it should be able to draw air in from the side as well. But now the air that would normally be coming up like this is not getting in there. So this is really hindering the performance considerably, but due to the ceiling height down here, we have to install them this way to make it usable. So that's a bummer, but it's this or we don't have fans down here, so this is what we do. It does not disappoint at all. It moves plenty of air, and if I stand over here in the corner, I can feel it kicking up the wall. It's quite powerful. It even was more powerful than I was expecting. And I hold these fans at pretty high regard. I think these are decent, generally pretty good fans. I don't have the specs that list the blade pitch, but according to the Boston Harbor unit, the blade pitch is 11.5 degrees, and these things are pretty much identical. So I expect that the blade pitch is probably 11.5 degrees on this one as well. Now it says 215 RPM on high. I think it's doing at least that. This is running very fast. It definitely outperforms the Littleton, for sure. It's definitely much more powerful. The Littleton doesn't run all that fast. This is running very fast. Okay, now we'll go down to the medium. And, the blades are in decent clock despite those flimsy stamped irons. Barely moves, doesn't shake much. Completely silent motor. There is a little bit of bearing noise, but keep in mind that this is, these bearings sat in the box for 25 years unused, and I've only put about half an hour of use on this since I took it out of the box. So in the bearings defense, they have not had anywhere near enough time to break in as they should. Now, as I said before, SMC is pretty notorious for using noisy bearings, so I wouldn't be surprised if the bearings are just generally noisy even after a break-in period, but that clicking noise would probably go away, and at worst you'd likely have a whirring sound, a constant whirring, which, in my opinion, if you're going to have noisy bearings, that's probably the least annoying sound they can make. Even the airflow noise, is very minimal on this. Everything is just very quiet. Here we go. I don't know why I had the light on. That's not correct. Very, very reasonable noise level, and it would be even quieter if it was installed on a proper normal ceiling. And the low, which of course is the slowest speed. Now this is considerably slower on low than the Boston Harbor one is. And I don't want to harp too much on the difference between the two because we're going to compare the two in a separate video. But this one lists the RPM as 100 on low, and I think that that's about right. It's a pretty fast low, but it is a 42-inch fan, and those run a little faster on low. I prefer a very slow low, so this to me is way too fast. But it's pretty average. And it is still pushing air. You can still feel a considerable breeze coming down from the fan. And there is some vibration, but very, very little. I don't know what these sold for when they were new. I would expect probably less than $30. Granted, that was a fair bit of money back in 2001. You can see it's still pushing a decent breeze. I mean, there's some 42-inch fans that pretty much don't move any air on low. And this is still pushing a very detectable breeze. In fact, I would say it's beyond just detectable. It's noticeable and functional on low. And it's very quiet. This is actually quiet enough to leave installed here in the studio. The other fan I had in here, the Windward, that's a very nice looking fan. It's very powerful too, but the motor was very noisy, a lot of hum on it, which was not ideal for trying to record. This is very quiet and would not be disruptive to videos in the slightest. So this might actually live here for a while. I kind of just put it up here to do the comparison between the two, but I think it might actually stay. And surprisingly enough, the clearance is all right. You know, I hit the chain as I walk underneath it, but as long as I don't hit the light, that's all that matters. I guess one of the main reasons I find this model so interesting is that this, as far as I know it, was one of the last spinner ceiling fans sold here in the US market. There was a couple others that either ran simultaneously or shortly thereafter. There was one by, I think it was sold under Harbor Breeze, and it was it was like silver and had wood accents around the motor. It had 3 blades. That I'm pretty sure was yeah, that was definitely a spinner. So I guess that might have been the absolute last one. But this was the last like basic conventional style spinner here in the US market. Although inherently that's not accurate because this one is still around. Well, no, that doesn't change the statement. It's still the last basic spinner model. And it's just fascinating that this one lasted because these spinner style fans went out of fashion here in the US in the 90s, and they were just extinct by the 90s, but yet in other parts of the world, in Canada and other regions, they're still commonplace to this day. And I do believe that this is sold in Canada. In fact, it might even be intended for Canadian sales and just happens to also be sold here because it does have the safety cable, which I believe is still standard in Canada, but it's not standard here. At least not for residential grade fans. It's really neat to see this in person again. I remember seeing this in the 2001 catalog, and I read that catalog so many times, hundreds and hundreds of times over the years. And so now to have this here operating in person is pretty cool. And the fact that it's actually a good quality product too. Yeah, cut it off. Normally I don't test the reverse because I just don't use it, but I want to test it this time because of the way the sealing is. It's not going to be limited by performance on reverse. It'll force the air up with no problem. So I'm just kind of curious how it's going to operate. And no, it's not going to ruin the motor to switch it while it's running. Oh gosh, the motor's ruined. What a shame. Yeah, that's that's not bad. That's really pushing a lot of air. There's a piece of trim there that's blowing around. That's what that metallic noise is. And look at that. That's no joke. Is that in the frame? Probably not. It's stuck to the ceiling. Yeah, I think the performance of this is seriously hindered by the ceiling. So we'll definitely have to test at least the Boston Harbor one in a normal ceiling. I can feel air just bouncing around all over the place. Very, very powerful. Yeah, it's a really solid piece. I'm pleasantly surprised. And it's got a fair bit of power to it to be able to stop that quick. It's not a chintzy fan. I had a friend who used to have the earlier version of the Grayton in his bedroom, and that one was pretty powerful too. And although I haven't personally tested one, from what I can tell, the newer version of the Grayton that was introduced in 2002 was also pretty strong. Actually, I happen to have both this one and the older version right here on the bench. So I'll need to install this older one soon so we can test all of them together. Unfortunately, the airflow, issue becomes a thing because it's the ceiling is prohibitive to getting a really accurate test. But if they're both in the same ceiling, then they're kind of both restricted the same way. Although over there, there's a lot of stuff in the way on all, 3 out of the 4 sides of the fan, so that probably restricts even more over there than it does over here, but oh well. I still can't believe this is still available. This is such a nice fan for something that's still available today. And here, this one is from 25 years ago. Still working great. I mean, granted, it sat in the box, but you know what? Things seem to break down just as much as they do sitting in the box as they do, working, you know, out in the wild. In fact, for some products, I feel like they last longer in use. So there's the 2001 Grayton. Excellent fan.